The Toronto Blue Jays sweep the New York Yankees. Hello and welcome to episode 152 of Section 138. I'm your host, Mark Colley, as always, joined by Bryson. What a week it was in Blue Jays world. We come into this series, we have our own expectations, we have our reservations, but the Blue Jays come out, they don't trail a single time in this four-game set. They take every game against the Yankees, and all of a sudden they're a half game back of a postseason spot. Bryson, how are you?
You know what? I'm doing good, but here's the thing I wanted to ask you too is I don't know what it is with this team and being clutch at Yankee Stadium this late in the season because it reminds me a lot of 2015, that early season in August where the Jays swept the Yankees, and I think that was for the AL East implications. But the point is they know how to be clutch at Yankee Stadium late in the season, and we saw the exact same thing this time, except compared to the series I mentioned in 2015, a 4-game sweep. When the heck was the last time you've seen that at Yankee Stadium or ever even predicted it?
Yeah, it's so hard to do a four-game sweep against any team, let alone the Yankees. So the fact that the Blue Jays did that in the middle of a playoff race against a team that is directly ahead of them, you're right. It's pretty magical to watch this happen with the Blue Jays. And it does always seem like there are critical series in September against the Yankees that the Blue Jays manage to take when things are going well. I think last season there was a series like that. I know they kind of struggled at the back end of things against the Yankees. They had that series where they gave up a historical amount of home runs in a four-game set last year, but they did have some success down the line against the Yankees. And of course, you refer to 2015 in September, that mid-September series when you have Marcus Stroman make his return from the injured list, make his first start back. You have some things go awry. You have the collision between Kevin Pillar and Troy Tulowitzki, of course, out in shallow center field. But again, just a pivotal series at a pivotal moment of the season. And that's what we're seeing with the Blue Jays right now. Like I said, they're a half game back of a postseason spot. What are your takeaways from this series? Because going into this, I know we all predicted 3 out of 4, but I thought it would be a tough series to win. I thought there would be a fight that the Yankees put up. And I don't know if it's just because the Yankees are collapsing right now. We've seen the lack of success they've had from the bullpen. We've seen the struggles they've had out of their rotation and from their starting lineup, but they didn't put up a fight. The Blue Jays battled and they won this series, but for all intents and purposes and by the appearances, it wasn't a tough series for them to win because they were leading at every single moment in the game if they weren't tied. They never trailed. So I don't know how to gauge the success of this series when it might be the Yankees just sucking right now, but it also might be the Blue Jays finally putting the pedal to the metal and having some success and winning 8 in a row against the Yankees and the Athletics.
Yeah, I think it's more the Jays putting the pedal to the metal. I think they are finally throughout this entire stretch and continuing into this 4-game series, we saw at a continued and consistent pace, even going back to last week, the offense and the pitching at the same time clicking, because in every game of this series, the starting pitching was there and it was really there. You go back to the first game of the series when Hyun-Jin Ryu went 6 scoreless innings against the Yankees. I said it when we recorded last time. I thought he was going to be one of the deciding factors of the series in turn, just because of the pitching matchup. And he showed up and he pitched well, and he's always pitched well at Yankee Stadium, regardless of his up and downs this year. So I give him that for sure. The offense we know is clicking. It's still clicking. Marcus Semien continues to be hot. Alejandro Kirk was homering throughout the series. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was homering throughout the series. Lots of notables from this series alone. And in particular, those 3 guys were really leading the way this weekend. Bo Bichette had a lot of solid hits as well. I'm missing so many people. Teoscar Hernandez, of course, did. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. continues his hot streak. And even the bullpen. I thought the bullpen did a solid job for the most part, going back to that first series as well. You had Trevor Richards, Tim Meza, Adam Simber close up the game in game 1, and they were all pretty much scoreless from there. And it was solid. It really was complete. There was no blowing games late. There was the offense scoring runs. And the best part about it is I feel like the offense in certain games, especially the one yesterday when they completed the sweep, could have scored even more runs. I felt like they had so many more left in the tank. And that's what was remarkable about it. And even on the Tuesday in game 2, you take out Gerrit Cole, as much as he left with an injury, you were hitting him around even before he left with this hamstring issue. Steven Matz, who has an ERA under 2 since the month of August. I think we mentioned that last week as well. But another start from him, another solid start. after him, Joaquin Soria, Tim Azo, Jordan Romano come into the game. And we all know it was solid from there as well. Alejandro Kirk homered to that game twice. Marcus Semien continues the hot streak. And that was pretty much one of the leaders for that as well. And even in game 3, I mean, we're going by game here, and you're seeing a pretty consistent thing in terms of solid starting pitching and solid bullpen help after that. And of course, the offense, what we're expecting to do, continues to hit. Alek Manoah in game 3, 5 2/3, 3 earned runs, a decent start for sure. And after that, you go with Richard, Simber, Romano as well. And that was kind of the consistent thing this series. They come out and they shut down the Yankees as well. And in that game, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hits the home run, and that was a clutch home run late. And, I think the game yesterday, to be honest with you, as much as we said that the Gerrit Cole one was probably the one that would lose, if anything, the one yesterday I thought shocked me the most, just because I was taking in once the 7th or 8th inning came in, especially when the Jays started adding those runs late. I believe it was in the 9th inning, Guerrero and homered and Valera doubled. It really started sinking in that this team just swept the New York Yankees, or they are on the verge of sweeping the New York Yankees in a crucial 4-game series. And it was a lot a lot more impactful than I thought, because I was obviously tuned into the games, distracted by the games. But when it was all said and done, crazy series. I mean, and especially in the game yesterday, Jose Barrios, 6 2/3, 2 earned runs. Soria, Meza, Pearson come out of the bullpen after that. I know Nate Pearson had a rocky 9th inning, but for the most part, everything was went as planned. And, from that too, the one thing I take away from it is when Anthony Rizzo tied the game off of Jose Barrios, the Jays kept going. It's not like, it was on the verge of a collapse, or, this was the beginning of them collapsing in the game. They kept going, and the next inning they found ways to get runs in. And that was crazy to see, because we haven't seen it consistently this year. And that's what happened basically in the 7th inning, right after Bo Bichette singled home. I think it was Danny Jansen. That was the go-ahead run. And from there, they added a couple more runs, a couple more insurance runs. And even earlier in that game, Grichuk homered, Bichette homered, Guerrero homered again in the 9th inning. I mean, this team was by far on it this week. They knew the implications. They knew they had to play well. Can't say the same for the Yankees. The only thing the Yankees were doing was celebrating a home run with Luke Voigt with 2 outs left in the 9th inning. I mean, that's a little bit funny in my opinion, just because they lost all 4 games. But yeah, either way, complete game. The offense, the pitching, clicking at the same time. This team is finally showing, I think, how good of the season, or how good we were expecting them to be at the start of the season. And the best part about it too is people keep getting healthier and healthier, minus Springer. I know that that's something that they still have to deal with, but the bullpen arms keep coming in. Julian Merryweather was activated in the series, and they're really, at this point, they got to keep going. And I think at this point we can't think otherwise, because of this weekend coming up against the Orioles for a 4-game series, which is a doubleheader on Saturday. They have all the, they have the schedule to do it, and they continue to have the momentum to do it. And right now they're finally clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, throughout this whole season, you could find reasons for why the Blue Jays wouldn't be performing at their best, whether it was Springer being injured, whether it was other reasons with, not having a lot of depth in the rotation, whether it was the bullpen screwing things up. Right now, there's no excuse for the Blue Jays to not be in the driver's seat in the AL wildcard race. They're a half game back, and, by all accounts, they are in the driver's seat. The Red Sox have lost a lot of ground to the Blue Jays. The Yankees, of course, just lost 4 games to the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are in the driver's seat, and right now there's no excuse for them not to take over that spot. Now, this is the optimistic part of us talking when we say the Blue Jays have no excuse to lose anymore, but it's true. Every part of their game is clicking. And like you mentioned, Bryson, the standout to me from this series, we had seen the success of the starting rotation before, but to me, it's the hitting in late and close situations and the bullpen. Because all of these games, it seemed like, with the exception of maybe one, you are tied or at least 1 run up going into like the 7th inning. But in every one of these games, the Blue Jays tacked on in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. We saw the Blue Jays score 4 runs in the 7th, 8th, and 9th last night. I think they scored 3 runs in the last 3 innings on Tuesday's game or Wednesday's game, excuse me. So you have all these opportunities that the Blue Jays are getting that we've seen them screw up before, and finally there's cashing in those runs. Of course, they also missed some key opportunities. You have that game where they got 11 walks and they only scored 5 runs. So you have these games where they didn't take advantage of all those opportunities, but then that's where the bullpen comes in. That's where the strong starting pitching comes in. You don't have to take advantage of those opportunities if your bullpen is throwing zeros. And for almost the entirety of this series, the bullpen was throwing zeros. They didn't give up a single earned run until the ninth inning of yesterday's game of the series finale. That was Nate Pearson, of course. We saw him come in, struggle, gave up back-to-back solo shots to Gary Sanchez and Luke Voigt. But besides that, it was a spotless day, a spotless series for the bullpen. And that's what's impressing me the most. We've always talked about the potential of this team if the bullpen just comes along and does its part. And we saw that in this series. We saw that to some extent, not totally, in this series against Oakland. Of course, you have that game where the Blue Jays almost give up a, 8-run lead. So it wasn't always there, but in this series against the Yankees, it was. And that's part of the success for the Blue Jays and why they could win these close games. So I think that was so impressive. And yeah, they're getting reinforcements. Julian Merryweather, we haven't seen him pitch yet, but he's up in the majors now. Nate Pearson, of course, he came back in the Oakland series, and we saw him have, struggles in his first outing. He was successful in his second outing where he struck out the side, and then now struggles again in his third time out. But again, it's just having those options, having those hard throwing guys, those guys who can put out fires before you get to Jordan Romano. That's really important in the bullpen. And I want to ask you about Jordan Romano, because at no point this season have we seen him come into 3 consecutive games, but it looked like last night the Blue Jays were preparing to do so if Pearson had not gotten out of that 9th inning. Do you think he should be used more aggressively as we head down the stretch through September, through a postseason race? Like, should the Blue Jays try to push his limits, get him into 3 consecutive games? Or since what they've done for the rest of the season has worked and we've had injury scares with Romano in the past, should they stick with the 2 days on, 1 day off pattern?
Honestly, at this point, this late in the season, this is obviously a different discussion than if it would be in April, and everyone kind of understands that. But obviously 2 days in a row, I think everyone's fine with, and then the 1 day off, like that's a lock of something that's fine. Or we're fine with that happening. But if he's going to go in for 3 straight games, I mean, I think you exercise it if you have to. And I think yesterday was a perfect example of why that's the case, because obviously going into the 9th inning, it's not a save situation. So you're going to bring in Nate Pearson. We know Nate Pearson warmed up in the game prior, and the Jays were probably looking at bringing him in as well in that game. So you bring him in, he gives up 2 runs. All of a sudden, it's a 2-run game. And they're also at this point too, there was 2 outs. So really, if Jordan Romano came in, all he would need to do is get 1 out. And that's why I think in certain situations where it's kind of have to be, evaluated at the time, it's something that you got to make kind of, at the heat of the moment during the time. If you have to secure these wins and do whatever it takes to do it, I have no problem with him warming up, or the Jays kind of looking into bringing him in or preparing for the fact that they might have to bring him in on 3 straight days. I mean, it's in September. We know the implications. We know where they are in the standings. They're currently half of a game out now of a playoff spot in that second wildcard spot. And of course, the first wildcard spot is totally up for grabs as well, as the Red Sox only have a 1-game lead in that. You have to do it. And I think as the season goes on, as we even get into the final 2 weeks of the season, we're in the stretch here, the home stretch of the season. And especially when we get into mid-September, late September, and the Jays remain in contention, I think you're going to see a lot of that, or a lot of, that possibility, or a lot of that, just the Jays setting it up just in case to do that. I think it's the right decision to make. I think Jordan Romano can handle it. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion prior to the game. The Jays know if he's healthy or not, or if he's going to be available or not. So a lot of this relies on him feeling good as well. This year in particular, I know there has been injury scares, but this year in particular, Romano's been healthy for pretty much the most part. And that's why at this point of the season, for the last 2-3 weeks, if you have to do it, like absolutely have to, I don't think you do it on a, automatically, because I think you do have the reinforcements like Merryweather, who we saw close all the way back in the first series of the season. I think he's an option. Obviously the Jays didn't want to give him probably any action this series. I'm sure you're going to see him this weekend a lot, but if they have to, I think you do it. It's not something that, I'm automatically going to go to, though. If the Jays have a save situation in 3 straight games where he'd come in, I think you bring him in as kind of not a last resort, but kind of just in preparation of doing that. And I think yesterday was a perfect example of how they did that.
Yeah, you obviously want to do it in moderation, and you want to be aware of what's happening in the game. But yeah, I see no reason why you shouldn't bring him in three straight games. Like obviously there are the workload concerns, the health concerns, but the Blue Jays are in a playoff run. Like they are in the fight for their season. Buck Martinez said it on the broadcast yesterday. I disagree with a lot of what Buck Martinez said, but he said you can rest in October, you can rest in December if you don't make it into the postseason, but you got to make it into the postseason first. You can rest in the offseason. And yeah, that like you can still do damage to your arm if you're being overpitched during the season. But if this was a situation like, I don't know, Hyunjin Ryu, where we know he works better on like 5 days rest, like he works better on an extra day of rest, you wouldn't be experimenting with a short day of rest. But because it's Jordan Romano, I don't think we've ever seen him on a schedule of 3 days in a row. So I don't know whether it works or not. So until we know that he pitches better 2 days on and 1 day off, why not throw him out there? Why not use your best tool as frequently as you can while keeping him healthy to win ball games? So yeah, I'm with you there until we're given a reason to not put him out there, until he's day to day with something, until he is struggling significantly, seeing the same team 3 days in a row. Keep throwing him out there. I'm completely for it. You mentioned this a little bit, but this entire series, I just kind of watched in disbelief as it was happening, especially that last game where it, like you said, it started to sink in that the Blue Jays were actually going to sweep the Yankees. But every single game, I just expected something to go wrong because A, that's how the Blue Jays play this season. Something always goes wrong. And B, you are playing the Yankees. Like this is a team that not that long ago won 13 games in a row. So I expected them to put more of a fight up, but every single game I just watched in disbelief as a 1 game 1, 1 game 2, 1 game 3, 1 game 4, especially the Gerrit Cole game. That's the game I think where you're talking about it being the last game where it really sunk in, and the sweep kind of sunk in for me there. But the Gerrit Cole game was really where it sunk in that, the Blue Jays can make up significant ground here. They can make up 2 games, if not all 4 games in the wild card race. They would have made up 2 games if they lost 1 game of this series. Of course, we know what happened. But when they beat Gerrit Cole, or Gerrit Cole beat himself with the injury, that's kind of where it set in for me. Like they could actually do this because Gerrit Cole, I wrote this on Instagram, but I was kind of looking at it as a write-off game. It was against, one of the best starters in baseball, and you have Steven Matz on the other side of the mound. So it's not like it's a, cream of the crop, best starter against best starter. Like if it was Robbie Ray against Gerrit Cole, it was Steven Matz against Gerrit Cole. So that game, I kind of accepted to myself that the Blue Jays can lose this. They probably will lose this. The odds are that they will lose this. And when they won that game, it was kind of like, okay, this is gravy. We can do this. They can get through this series with picking up ground on the Yankees. Where did you stand on that Gerrit Cole game? What were your expectations going in? And I guess the Blue Jays were helped by the injury a lot. They got Gerrit Cole out after less than 4 complete innings, but man, I was surprised watching that game, watching the Blue Jays have success.
Yeah, and I think if you go back, or for anyone listening, go back to our last one. I think all three of us actually said the same thing about that second game in terms of, okay, the Jays, our predictions are going to take 3 out of 4, and if they're going to lose a game, it's going to be the Gerrit Cole game. And I think all of us kind of understood that. Now, at the time, though, I guess to talk about it more, I think at the time, for me personally, what I was expecting it to still be close. I didn't think the Jays were going to score a boatload of runs, but however, as much as it was Steven Matz pitching, you have to take into account of the month of August, and I guess the first couple starts now of September that Steven Matz has had, because he's been great and everyone knows that. And that's why I was kind of a little bit more optimistic than usual, because it was Steven Matz. And obviously, if you're going to ask me that in July, if I was optimistic about Steven Matz versus Gerrit Cole, anyone would have called me crazy. But I mean, his numbers since the beginning of August have been outstanding. I mentioned it earlier on. I think he's an ERA below 2. And, I think he's got an average against of like 224, and he's been lights out, 18 strikeouts in that span. And, even a whip of 1.11. So he's allowing less than the average of base runners an inning. Everything about his game, he's been mediocre obviously throughout the entire year. He had a really good start in April, and he's been up and down, ever since. But then ever since August started, he's doubled down, and I think he's really settled in here. And that's why I took into account of it. It is Steven Matz who's been great, and the Jays have a shot, of course, but it's not going to become easy as Gerrit Cole is, and obviously Jays fans would know because of the Cy Young race with Robbie Ray, is he's also one of the favorites or one of the people that are leading the way in terms of him. Lance Lynn, I don't know how that's going to impact him because Lance Lynn's currently injured, and Robbie Ray. So those three guys, we were talking, I think we spoke about it a couple weeks ago. If we thought Robbie Ray had a legitimate shot, and I think if you're going to ask us this again, I think Robbie Ray as well now has an even better shot with this happening, with what's going on the past couple weeks. But yeah, the Gerrit Cole game was a write-off for sure, entering it. And that's why, at the time though, when the Jays did win, of course, it sunk into me as well that, the potential to sweep is there now. Like that was the only hurdle I think that was ahead of us in terms of predicting a sweep. I still at the time, and you mentioned it too, we know, the downfall or the moments the Jays have had this year where you get so excited and then they find a way to, just mess it up. And that's why at the time I'm like, okay, obviously it's possible, but is it too good to be true, or like what's the catch? And that's why I was prepared for the worst in terms of game 3 and 4, but they completely proved me wrong, and they've been playing the way they've been playing the last week. They just paved the road for them to complete the sweep. Going back to their winning streak, they've been 14-6, I think, since the Orioles series almost a month ago. Against the White Sox, against the Tigers, I believe they went 5-5. I believe they were 500 throughout that series. So around there is obviously when it turned around. And then they take 4 from the Yankees, they take 3 from the A's, and that's where they've made the turn now. So, if you're going to ask me a couple weeks ago, completely different situation to where we are now. But the fact that Steven Matz was pitching as good as he has been the past month, I did give the Jays a glimmer of hope, or a glimmer. Like, I was a little bit optimistic for sure. But then once, it actually happened, yeah, it sunk in to me that the potential to do it was there. And then it really sunk in yesterday when, in the 9th inning, where I'm like, oh my God, it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean no disrespect to Steven Matz when I say I expect Gerrit Cole and the Yankees to win that game. It's just on paper, you look at the matchup, Steven Matz or Gerrit Cole, it's very lopsided. Even knowing Steven Matz's history over the past, month and a half. But one last note on our bullpen conversation with Jordan Romano. Charlie Montoyo told Rob Longley of the Toronto Sun that Jordan Romano came to him and said, quote, if it's a save situation, I'm in. So he wants to pitch back to back games. He wants to be involved if it's a close game. And that's what you want from your players. That's what you want from your bullpen. You want everyone involved and rooting for a win. And I think it was Jose Barrios who said this after yesterday's game, but he said, the thing about the Blue Jays is that everyone's rooting for you. Everyone's rooting for each other. Everyone's rooting for the team to win, and everyone's involved every step of the way. So that's part of what makes this team special. We've talked about it before, but a lot of fun to watch. I think now, if we were betting, Robbie Ray has better odds to win the Cy Young in the American League than Gerrit Cole. And I think people have kind of taken a backseat on Lance Lynn as well. He's kind of taken a backseat in this race. So it might be Robbie Ray's race to lose now. He might be in the driver's seat for AL Cy Young. And I especially think so because even if this shouldn't impact the conversation, we always know whether a team is a competitor or not makes an impact on these things, right? Like everyone always talks about Mike Trout MVP years, a couple years ago. It was always a conversation of, well, should you vote for him because the Angels are a 500 team? The Angels are below 500. That's always part of the conversation, even if it shouldn't be. So having the Blue Jays make this push, catch everyone's attention, everyone watching their games, you see John Morosi tweeting about them. You see all these guys across baseball. Bob Nightingale was tweeting about them. Heaven forbid Bob Nightingale says something about us, but he's tweeting about the Blue Jays. So you have all these people paying attention to the team from across baseball. And I think that helps Robbie Ray in his case for Cy Young. Even though the numbers, as it stands now, are probably better than Gerrit Cole, probably better than Lance Lynn, and certainly the health is better than Gerrit Cole, with Gerrit Cole seemingly sidelined, at least for a little bit. Who knows how extreme it is, even if he doesn't miss a start. He only got, 3.2 innings in that outing. seems like Robbie Ray is now the odds-on favorite to win.
Absolutely, he is. And you made a very good point, because it is true, regardless if people agree with it or not, is that a lot of people take into account in terms of, the team's success. And if you want to look at it beforehand, or even, I guess, a month ago when the Jays were out of it, as much, out of the race, as much as we, hate to admit it, they were. You have Gerrit Cole and Lance Lynn, both playoff teams. Obviously, the White Sox have the AL Central locked up. They've had it locked up for a while. And then the Yankees, who are all of a sudden emerged. You mentioned the 13-game winning streak they went on. They look like, heavy favorites as well at the time for that wild card spot. And then, of course, you have Robbie Ray for a team on the Jays who's on the outside looking in, and that was definitely one of the reasons, or what was holding him back from, I guess, being considered like heavy favorite to to win the Cy Young. And all of a sudden the Jays emerge. They go on their winning streak. They're half of a game out now. They're completely in it. With the Red Sox, with the Yankees, the Athletics, the Mariners, but the Jays, were pretty much doing building blocks over this last week, because the first goal was to obviously pass the Mariners, past Oakland, and that's what they did last weekend. And then now all of a sudden they're a half of a game out of a playoff spot, and the Jays are getting the recognition. You said they're finally getting the recognition I think they deserve. Unfortunately, this year they just haven't gotten a lot because of the consistent ups and downs, like as a team, because obviously people like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., people like, just zeroing in on him and focusing on certain players on this team was pretty much what you saw this year in terms of, oh, look at the accomplishments here. One of the best seasons in Jays history for a Jays player. But now what you're seeing is, even over the past week now, is the entire team, like you mentioned, is getting the recognition, getting the attention. And it's definitely helping Robbie Ray in the Cy Young race. And yeah, he's leading the AL in ERA now. He's leading the AL as well in WHIP at 0.99. He's got the best average, or the lowest average against, which is at 203. All his numbers are the best in the American League. And he's pitched more innings than Gerrit Cole and Lance Lynn. So, that's what makes it exciting. And that's why, this is a legitimate chance for Robbie Ray to do it. And, I just go back to the series quickly too. The Jays did all this without Robbie Ray pitching. Then that's the best part about it. And you send him out tonight in game 1 against the Orioles, but he's completely taken the league by storm, I think, over the last couple of weeks, because it's been a quiet season for him. I guess around the game of baseball, where he's pitched as well as he has. Jays fans know how good he's been, but I mean, the entire league, it's kind of been quiet. And all of a sudden now, ever since the month of August ended, and you mentioned him in the possible Cy Young race, he's getting the love, he's getting the attention. And I think, and I do really think a lot of people are starting to zero in on him and kind of look at the numbers here and show how good of a season he's had. I make the Gerrit Cole argument. I think a lot of people do, with the blow up month of I think it was June or July that he had after the spider attack thing and the sticky stuff thing, because there was a few starts there where he was a complete mess. And a lot of people were saying how that's just sticky stuff, or the reason for his success all along. But I know he's kind of settled down as well, and he's been pitching good. But Robbie Ray has been more consistent than Gerrit Cole. He's been better than Gerrit Cole. And Lance Lynn also, he's been good for the most part. But yeah, he's kind of faded a little bit from the conversation over the past couple of weeks. This is Robbie Ray's award to win. And I think you're right about it. And it's also his award to lose. If he just keeps pitching the way he is, there's no reason why he doesn't win the Cy Young. There's no reason at all.
All right. Well, let's talk about the one bad thing from this series before we finish it up on a positive note. But it's George Springer. We saw him struggling through and getting through that series against Oakland, even though he is so clearly not at 100%. I don't think he's at 80%. I don't think he's at 70%. He's at 60% tops on that field. Watching him play, you can tell he is in so much pain, and you got to respect him for being on the field and having that high pain tolerance. And he wants to help the Blue Jays so much, helping them win. But in the second game of that series, he takes that awkward swing. He goes down to one knee. He takes a foul ball off his knee cap while he's wearing that knee brace, and he just stays in a knee at home plate for a couple seconds, and eventually he manages to hobble off the field. He's day now. We haven't seen him on the field in the 2 games since. We've mentioned this before, but the Blue Jays were right to rush him back. You're in the middle of a postseason race. They were sitting ducks. They were dead in the water without George Springer. They brought him back. It kind of ignited this team to what we're seeing now. They were right to rush him back. But just watching him on the field, seeing him in the box, and he's not really doing anything. He's just standing there and seemingly enduring pain. I don't know how much of the worth there is to having him on the field. And yes, maybe he comes back from this brief day-to-day stint and is okay and, can hold his own in the box again. But, just watching him go through so much pain, it was kind of really uncomfortable. And I was rooting for him to be taken out of the game. I wanted to have him sit on the bench and just, have the rest of the team carry from that point forward. And that's what the Blue Jays did in the game 3 and 4 of that series and in the later half of game 2, because the worry was always that the Blue Jays wouldn't be able to perform without George Springer. And they did. So now that the offense is clicking, I feel like it's not necessary to force George Springer into that. And of course, it's George Springer's decision to be back in the lineup, but for George Springer to push himself and put himself in the lineup, if the lineup is clicking as is, and Alejandro Kirk is being a fantastic DH right now, there's no reason to have Springer suffer through that pain and be on the field if the Blue Jays are winning. Again, you'd love to have him there. You'd love to have him at 100%, but while he's not at 100%, I'm just not sure it's worth it if the rest of the lineup is doing so well. And it's going to take away at-bats from someone like Alejandro Kirk.
Which is why at the time when he came back, that was the only problem of him coming back, was that he was going to be a full-time DH. I know it makes it deeper. You can make the argument. Of course you can, but it just limits everyone and it takes at-bats away from Alejandro Kirk, like you mentioned. And at the time right now, I'd rather a healthy Alejandro Kirk. And you've seen the week he's put up an OPS over 1,200 over the last week. He's hit, I think it's 3 home runs, 6 RBIs, been one of the best hitters on this team, batting well over 300, a slugging percentage over 800. And, going back to Springer, yeah, it's tough to watch. It was tough to watch. And it is uncomfortable because we saw the glimpse of him during the very first homestand when the Jays came back, because that was his hottest streak of the season. You saw him healthy. You saw him hitting home runs every game. We have seen a glimpse of the healthy Springer this year, but unfortunately we just haven't seen it enough. But I do give him credit. I agree with you. There's no regrets there of bringing him back when they did. I would have done the exact same thing over and over again, especially the situation they're in the month of September. There's no doubt or there's no fault for what happened. But now, like, when you look at it, is it maybe a better idea to take this chance and make this push without him for a couple of weeks, and you bring him back, maybe the last week of the season and he's a little bit healthier? I'm not saying that's going to happen, because I believe he's going to be, there's a chance he's back this weekend, but that was what's going through my head at the time, going all the way back to that game when he was rolling around in pain. Because the thing too is, it's not like he's just uncomfortable when he's running or walking. Like, you can tell it's impacting his actual swing, and he's striking out, a lot of weak contact. I know we got a couple good hits back in the athletic series, but he just a lot of weak contact, and it's affecting obviously his numbers, but it's also just, at the time, it's affecting his play. That's the thing I'm looking at the most. It's not like something he's dealing with on the side when he's running to first base. It's in the batter's box, and that's what concerns me the most. And that's why at the time I remember saying to myself, I'm like, maybe it's a better idea, as much as it sucks and as much as it's crazy to say, but this team's been so good that maybe there's a chance that you take the chance and you shut him down for another couple of weeks and you bring him back for that last run. But obviously, who knows what the heck's going on, because we know the way Charlie Montoyo is with his day-to-day analysis. Like, that can easily turn into an IL stint as of tonight. He can easily be back leading off tonight. So we really don't know what the heck's going on. Yes, it is going to be up to Springer. I don't think he's going on the IL now. I think it would have happened by now, because there's obviously, 2 games now where he's been on the bench. It's just something that they're going to monitor. There's really nothing he can do other than wear a knee brace, because, you're going to take the chances of hitting a foul ball off your leg. That's something that's going to happen. You're going to swing. It's going to be uncomfortable. And even Montoyo came out and acknowledged it, I think, and he completely admitted it to the press. Has said, listen, if he's going to play for the rest of the year, he's going to be dealing with pain. So everyone knows the implications. The only problem I have with it is, if there's a better way to control it, because obviously none of us know what's really going on or how healthy he really is. But based on what we've seen, it's not even close. And that's why, even going back to the center field topic, don't even mention center field for the rest of the year. I think that's completely done. And that's why it's concerning, because if there's a better way to manage it, hopefully the Jays can find it, or maybe there's a way for him to manage it better. But as of now, it's just taking away at bats from healthy people on the team, a healthy Alejandro Kirk. And that's the problem, because once he's DHing, nobody else can really DH right now. So you saw it this series, Alejandro Kirk was DHing. It was more flexible, but you obviously would rather Springer in there. And I think everyone would tell you that. But at this point, you know, at his rate of health, it's tough to see. And that's why everyone's rooting for him. Everyone hopes he's back at some point this year. I think he will be back. But the other question too is, when he does come back, or whenever the heck it is he going to be consistently playing every day? Is it going to be kind of like an on and off thing? I know that's going to affect, his groove and his timing, but there's got to be another way where this can be managed well, because think about it now. And you want to, we weren't really in this position as of last week when you look at it now. So the Jays are half of a game out. And if you want to talk about the end of the month, and we know what we're talking about in terms of the wild card game, you need him for that as well. Like, you got to look ahead as well at the same time, and you have to find a way to manage this. And obviously he needs to find a way to manage it. So no matter what happens, if he sits out a little bit more or he comes back, we're all rooting for him. And that's why I don't want to make any predictions of what's going on, because of, just how crazy the Jays have been with their injury announcements. We'll see. I mean, we'll see, but yeah, overall tough to watch, and you hope it only gets better from here. You hope he's feeling better now. So, I mean, who knows at this point, but yeah, you give him credit for trying. And I think a lot of fans respect that for sure. So, this team in the playoffs, if they do make it, or if this wild card team, you hope that George Springer's in the lineup for that game as well. So fingers are crossed for his status. And, maybe this weekend again, you see him play. So let's see.
Mm-hmm. And two other factors in relation to him coming back and being the DH. The number one factor is Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which is, of course, less of a big deal as the Alejandro Kirk playing time, because Vladdy's going to be in the lineup no matter what. But it means that down the stretch, as we've seen the wear and tear of a season on him, although he's hot right now, hit home run 40, 41, and 42 in this series. He's going to be on his feet all the time if George Springer is back and DHing. So that's one factor that plays into this. Another factor is Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette wasn't hot before. He was as cold as a rock when it comes to what he was doing in the number 4 spot in the lineup. But now, he's been bumped up to number 1. And over the last few days, he's hot. He's had really good days. Yesterday, I think he was 3 for 5. That's what the Blue Jays need. And without Bo Bichette being hot, you don't really have a true leadoff hitter. Yeah, you can put Marcus Semien up there, but I think the reason Semien's staying at 2 right now is because he's found so much comfort and success at that point in the lineup, and the Blue Jays like him there. Without Bo Bichette being hot, you don't have a true leadoff hitter. So you need George Springer up there. You can't be rolling out Corey Dickerson in games like these as a leadoff hitter. That's just, it's bizarre. It's an off the wall idea. I don't know why the Blue Jays thought about it in the first place or why they considered it at all, but you can't be rolling out Corey Dickerson in the leadoff spot. So that's another reason to, maybe push the brakes a little bit on George Springer, because Bo Bichette right now can carry the team as a leadoff hitter. He can find success as a leadoff hitter and help the Blue Jays there. You don't need George Springer in that spot to have success at the top of the lineup. So that's just two more factors that factor into this conversation, and we'll see what happens. It'll certainly be interesting to watch how the Blue Jays treat his injuries, but all right, let's stop talking about that. The Blue Jays just swept the team directly ahead of them, so we can't be too pessimistic this episode. The last thing I want to do, I know we end every podcast like this, but just look at the schedule ahead for the Blue Jays, because I don't know, it feels like we've mentioned it before, every moment that they finally get a bit of momentum, and right now they have a whole lot of momentum, they always seem to lose it somehow. But you look at the schedule ahead, and it only gets easier from here. They have 4 games against the Baltimore Orioles, so I think you can pretty much put it in the books as 3 wins already. If everything goes according to plan, it'd be 4 wins. And then you have a series against the Rays, which is obviously going to be tough. If I was predicting that, I would say the Blue Jays lose 2 or 3 to the Rays, because it seems like that's always what happens. But then you got another series against Minnesota. That's a team you can roll over. You got a series against Tampa Bay, another tough series. I would predict 2 to 3 you lose, and then Minnesota and New York again. So, if you're figuring things out and you're trying to figure out where the Blue Jays get these wins that they need to make the postseason, you have 3, if not 4 easy wins right away to take that first wild card spot or second wild card spot against Baltimore. And that's what makes me so optimistic. As much as the Blue Jays grinded and pushed to win this series against New York and that series against Oakland, both of which, even if both teams are struggling right now, it was still a fight, at least a little bit. The Blue Jays had many games that were tied against the Yankees. They were losing 8-2 against Oakland at one point. This series against Baltimore is going to be the exact opposite. And hopefully the Blue Jays can get into a postseason spot this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule is there for them, which is also a reason why I think, going back to the Springer thing, you want to take a chance. The schedule is in your favor. But anyways, for this, yes, it's going to be. We all know the road ahead. Yes, this weekend, I think we're all expecting good things. But yeah, this is a chance for them to continue to go on their run because they have the schedule to do it. They see the Twins twice, and really the only tough matchup they have is just those Rays series. And then they have, I think, they have one more series against the Yankees at the end of the year. But somebody pointed it out as well in terms of the amount of games the Jays have made up. And a lot of people were saying the Jays really made up more games than it looks on the schedule because the Red Sox and the Yankees actually have to play each other again. And they're doing that, I think, in a couple weeks. So that's also going to be huge for the Jays standpoint because obviously one of those teams is going to lose. So that helps you gain ground from there. I know the Red Sox are playing the White Sox this weekend. And I think the Yankees have a little bit more of a favorable schedule going down the road too. So really at this point, you hate the scoreboard watch, but it's something that always happens in a pennant race. But for the Jays, the schedule is there for them to, I guess, just to continue this run. And, we all know the ground they had to make up. They made up the ground, but you can't stop because even if you get in that spot, you got to keep winning regardless. So, yeah, you have a 4-game series against the Orioles this weekend. Obviously, Saturday is a doubleheader, which makes it 4 games. And then, you said it. You have the Rays twice, you have the Twins twice, and then you have the Yankees at the end of the year. They can do it. We all know that. Hopefully a couple more sweeps, that would be ideal. And for this point too, I mean, I know it's tough and I know we very rarely see it, but I think, it's just also to exceed expectations. I think especially the series in Toronto against the Rays, I think you have to try and win that one. I think you have to, the hot streak they're on right now. I know the Rays are also pretty much the most consistent team in the American League, but I feel like you have to take one of those series as well. The series at Tropicana Field, I'm not going to really expect a lot out of at all. And then, of course, those Twin series, take 2 out of 3, and maybe you sweep one of those as well. So I hate to predict sweeps every single time, but, it's there for them. And it's a good time to be a Jays fan. And before I close it off and send it off to you, Mark, I just want to mention too, and I think you'll agree with me on this one, is it's been a very quiet over the past week here on the Charlie Montoyo criticism. I just want to point that out. I don't think I've heard a peep in the last week.
Yeah, I actually put something out on Instagram about I forget which game it was. I think it was Wednesday's game that they should have gone with Pearson instead of Romano, I think was my opinion for that Wednesday night game. And I actually got some people DMing me and saying, no, Charlie Montoyo made the right decision. He went to the right guy. And I was like, what is this? This is so unusual. Everyone's hating him normally. So, yeah, like we've been saying all season, when you have a good team, you look like a good manager. And that's what's happening right now. So, not to say I told you so, but okay. So going into this series against Baltimore, and by the way, they also finished the season against Baltimore. They have that set against the Yankees, but then they have a final set against Baltimore. So if you're looking for any kind of pick me up at the end of the season to get hot again, potentially going into the wild card game, that would be it. 3 games against Baltimore. And a good sliver of hope from this weekend or this week against the Yankees as well. They now take the season series against New York. Even if they get swept down the line in that 3-game set against New York, they have the season series. So if they tie with the Yankees in the wild card, they will play the wild card game in Toronto, no matter what. So we got that going for us as well. Okay, so going into this series against Baltimore, 3 of 4, 4 of 4. What are you predicting, Bryson?
Well, when you look at it, of course, doubleheader. Realistically, the Jays and doubleheaders this year, it hasn't been the worst thing, but it's kind of like, doubleheaders are always hard to predict no matter what. So I mean, you have Robbie right tonight. You have I don't even know who the probable starters is. I mean, the second game, I believe Ross Stripling is an option to return. I think for the second game, and then of course on the Sunday game as well, you have Ryu going. So, you're probably going to see Manoah maybe at some point this series, or not Manoah, but there's going to be somebody else going. There's no probable starter, but I think I'm going to call it. I'm going to say sweep again. I'm just, how special would that be too? 3 straight sweeps.
Wow. And that would be 12 in a row, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be the longest win streak in franchise history, right?
I believe so.
I think as it stands now, the longest win streak is 11 games. And the Blue Jays, of course, have done that a number of times. Of course, we saw it in 2015. I think they had 2 11-game win streaks in 2015. I think they had one in 2014, but I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it is. So yeah, that would be something. I'm just going to go 3 of 4. I know it's a safe bet. It's kind of boring, but like, even if it is against the Orioles, somehow things are going to go wrong. You have that doubleheader. You have Ross Stripling starting, who I think has only really worked up to like 30 pitches in his rehab start, and he only went like 1 or 2 innings. So not sure what that's going to look like. So if Ross Stripling's coming out for that game, maybe that's the write-off game that you have in this series. Who knows? But I'm just going to play it safe, save 3 of 4 for the Blue Jays because, as hard as 4-game sweeps are, I think 12-game winning streaks are even harder. So I don't know. We will see. I'm hoping for a sweep, obviously, but we'll see what happens. You have anything to add? Oh, okay. All right. Well, we will wrap it up there. It's a crazy week for the Blue Jays, and it's a crazy time to be a fan. We all said the Blue Jays were dead a couple of weeks ago, and here we are. They're half game back of a postseason spot, and they gained 9 games on the Yankees over the course of 2 weeks. So crazy baseball that we're watching, and you cannot complain about a single part of it. It's a lot of fun. Even if the results aren't what we want in the end, if they don't make the wild card, it'll still be a wild ride. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of Section 138. As always, you can listen to it on every podcast catcher, and you can watch it on YouTube. And if you enjoy our podcast, you can head over to Apple Podcast and give us a rating and review, which just helps spread the word about what we're doing, helps new people find our podcast and put in a good word about what we're doing. You can support our podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/section138pod. And then lastly, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at section138pod, where we always have something going on there, and you can stay up to date with what we're doing to make sure you never miss an episode, which you certainly don't want to do right now when the Blue Jays are hot. So we will catch you after this series against Baltimore, maybe the longest winning streak in franchise history if we have that stat correctly. But until then, we'll catch you next time.